Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to today's class of data analysis. So maybe we can just have a brief recap of what we did yesterday. Yesterday we looked at data analysis. We tried to understand what it means to analyze data. We also had the simple example of data analysis, and we also looked at SPSS, the theoretical aspect of SPSS. So like we said yesterday, today we'll look at the practical application of SPSS. So the first thing we do, I hope you managed to download the software, I hope you have it ready, and I hope you have your sample questionnaire ready. So the first thing we're going to do is open this software of SPSS and just familiarize ourselves with the interface and see how it looks. So this is basically SPSS opening. So when SPSS opens, this is the first window that comes. We can skip this for now. This just shows us if we want to open any existing data, but for us, since we're doing this for the first time and creating a data entry tablet for the first time, we can just close this. So first thing you need to understand is that SPSS opens two windows. We have our SPSS data editor, which is this, and we have another window here which says output. So in our data editor, this is where we'll set the template for data entry. These are going to enter data, and once we analyze our data, everything that we analyze is going to be brought into our output window here, as we are going to see later on when we start analyzing data. So today let's just focus on our data editor. Now our data editor has got two views that we're going to look at. It's got the variable view and it has the data view. The variable view is where we're going to input our questionnaire and set the commands for which the responses should adhere to. And in our data view, this is the place where we're going to enter all our data. So these are basically the two views that we have in our SPSS data editor. The variable view where we set our variables, and the data view where we see our data, where we enter our data even before we start analyzing. So like I mentioned yesterday, today we're going to look at data entry. So we'll try and create a template from the sample questionnaire that was given yesterday, and we'll try and see how we can enter data accordingly. So for you to be able to enter data, you need to start from your variable view. Like we said, this is where you set your parameters, or you set the commands which you want to apply when entering your data. So if I open the sample questionnaire, hope everyone had a chance to look at it. This was our sample questionnaire. It had questions from question 1 up to question 11. So before we start inputting this, let me first explain what the above here mean. Number 1, name. Under name, the name being talked about here is the variable name. This is where we enter the name of the variable. Here we are not allowed to have special characters such as commas, full stops, and we cannot start our variable name with a number. It must always start with a letter. We can however add a number after a letter, and we are limited to 8 characters. Secondly, it's a type. What type of question are we entering? Basically, in this course, we'll look at 2 types of questions. We'll look at the numeric question and the string question. The numeric question is a question which has numeric responses assigned to it. Like in the instance of our questionnaire, our first question here on what is your sex. This question is a numeric question because the responses, whether male or female, have got numbers assigned to them. So if you choose 1, it means they're male. If you choose 2, it means they're female. So all questions that have numbers assigned to the responses, those are categorized as numeric questions. While string questions are questions which do not have numbers assigned to the responses, meaning you can enter anything according to what the question has been asked. In the instance of our questionnaire, we have a string question here on question 9, which says, what are measures being put in place to minimize the gender gaps in the appointment of senior positions. Now these numbers you see here are just the numbering of the measures, not the number of the responses. So here you are at liberty to enter which response you feel is appropriate, or you feel you should put in your own words. From first, you put whatever response. If you're going to put down 4 measures or 2 measures, you write the first measure, the second one. So these are for numbering purposes and not for answering purposes. While in our first instance, these are for answering purposes. I hope that's clear. Then we have our width. Our width just sets the number of characters which our response should have. So if we put 2, means we can only have a maximum of 2 characters, and if we put more, it means we'll have more characters. Decimals, we apply decimals for questions which have decimal places. Maybe I'm measuring someone's height in meters, and maybe their height is 1.23. So the decimals which are being talked about here is the number of decimal places it should be rounded off to. The label is the full description of your variable, and the values are assigned numeric responses to the questions, as we are going to see as we start with question 1. We will not focus much on the missing columns, align, measure, and row, as they do not really are not a factor in the purpose of this course. They are normally a factor when we're doing qualitative data, which is not what we are doing, but we are doing quantitative data. So with that being said, let's start with question 1. So as mentioned earlier on, under name, we have to mention the variable name. So our question 1 says, what is your sex? So you can choose the variable name to give this. If you want, you can call it Q1 for question 1, or if you want, you can just label it as sex, being the name of the variable that you're trying to actually find out. So I shall name this Q1, standing for question 1. When I press enter, it will autofill. This is the default setting. The type will be numeric by default, the width will be 8 decimals, and so on. This is the default setting. Now you can change it according to how best you feel it should be. So this question, like we mentioned, is a numeric type of question, so we leave numeric. But had it been string, what we're going to do is we're going to click on the 3 dots here and click on string here and set the number of characters that we need to have in our responses and say OK. But because it's numeric, we leave it at numeric. The way this 8 characters is good enough. Decimal places, we need 0 because we only have 2 options, 1 male, 2 female. There are no decimal places. Then on label here, this is where you describe your label. So the name of the variable that we're having here is what is your sex. So you can type this in full, or you can just write sex, like as I said earlier on. But I'll type this in full. What is your sex, like that. So we have named our label, our variable here, which is Q1. Under values, this is where we set now the numeric responses, or the numeric assignments to each response. So when we go to values, we click these 3 dots here, and we have what we have, value, and we have label. So just as our questionnaire says, it says 1 male, 2 female. Even in our entering here, this is how we're going to enter it. Value, we have value 1, which will represent male. You say add, and value 2, which will represent female. And you say add, and then you say OK. So what this means is, for every person that answers male, you don't have to type the whole word male. All you type is the number 1, and it will automatically know that you mean male. If you type the number 2, it will automatically know that you mean female. This helps shorten the process, or helps you enter data faster, as when you are entering a huge number of questionnaires, it can be tedious to keep typing over and over. But all you do is press 1, it will automatically read that it's male, or 2, it's female. Like I said, these from here to here, we'll skip them for now because they're not really a factor in the quantitative data entry. But had this been qualitative, we would have changed some things, like, for example, the measure here. Remember, we looked at ordinal data, nominal data. This way we would have selected which kind of data it is. But if it's on scale automatically, then it's quantitative data, like we are dealing with. We go to question 2, which is our Q2. How old are you? Now this one falls under, despite being numeric, it falls under string because it's open-ended to someone to write how old they are. So you can either leave it as numeric or you can leave it as string, and you can set a number of characters, but you expect everyone to be within 2 characters because there's no one who expects to be above 100 years in your sample, for instance. So you can leave it at 8 characters, it's fine. And you just say, okay. You label it, and it says how old are you? Like that. So you go on with question 3, just like that. Question 4, these are all numeric questions, and so on and so forth. Now I'll skip this for now because the way you enter these questions is the same way you entered the previous questions that we've looked at. And I'll go straight into question 9, which is a string question. So let's assume, for argument's sake, that we have entered from question 1 to question 8, and now we are entering question 9. So we go say Q9. This comes by default. First thing we do is change the type of question. It's not a string question, it's not a numeric question, but rather it's a string question. So we change here from numeric, we put string. Number of characters, meaning number of letters which someone should put the responses. We don't want to have a short answer. So someone can type or can have a longer answer. So we can even put this as 100 characters to accommodate each answer. And we say, okay, we label our variable, which is what measures are being put in place to minimize the gender gaps. You can copy and paste this in full, or you can summarize it. It's up to you. I'll just copy and paste it in full, just for the sake of time, and I'll paste it here. And there we have our question. Let me clear this. Like that. So basically, this is how we are going to set our, or enter our questionnaire, or set the commands which we want our questions to have before we start entering data. Now, the last kind of question I'm going to look at is the matrix question, which is our question 11 here. A matrix question is a question which has many questions with similar responses. So in this instance, like question 11, all these are independent questions, but because they have similar responses, we avoid making the questionnaire long by writing question 11. There are more men in senior positions than women. Then you give these options. Question 12, you put this one, you give these options. Question 13, and so on. So to avoid that, because they have similar responses, all you do is put it in form of a table, and you put all the responses on one end and the questions on the other end, and someone should tick according to the responses. This is called a matrix question. So this is also a numeric question. All you do is assign values to each response. So for instance, here, strongly agree can be 1, agree will be 2, neutral will be 3, disagree will be 4, and strongly disagree will be 5. So that for every time you click 2, you know the person ticked agree. For every time you press 3, it was neutral, and so on and so forth. When it comes to the entering of data, you are going to, however, enter them independent. So this question here will be question 11a. So even here in your variable, it's going to be question 11a, like that. It's going to be numeric. What question is it you got here? Question 11a is there are more appointments in senior position for men than women. You copy this, you paste it on your label here. Let me clear this. Values, just like we discussed before, we assign 1 to mean strongly agree. We add 2, agree. We add 3, neutral. We add 4, disagree. We add, and 5, strongly disagree. We add. Now you notice that these are not like the way they were before. They have 1.0, they've got 2 decimal places. Why is that? It's because we did not change our decimal places to 0. That is why it's like this, as we have seen here. But the moment we change our decimal to 0, because there are no decimal places here, we set to 0 decimal places, you see that even this is going to change, and it's just now number 1 through 5. So basically, you're going to have to enter the entire questionnaire here and set the corresponding responses and assign the value that will correspond to that response in this view, which is the variable view. This is how we set our variables. And when we are done here now, we'll go to our data view. So this is where we do our data entry. So because we have not entered everything, we have only entered these questions, we can only enter data for these questions. Okay, so allow me to just show you how it's going to look when all the questionnaire is entered, as I have already entered them already. So this is how it's going to look when we enter all the questions from question 1 to question 11. So like we said, question 1 is here, just as though entering question 2, and so on and so forth. Marital status, it's here, and so on and so forth. So this is basically how it should look when you finish entering your variables in our variable view. And then when we finish now, we go to our data view for data entry. Now, when you go to our data view for data entry, this is how it's going to look. Our variable here under name, our variable names are going to appear on the top here. QID, Q1, Q2, Q3, and so on and so forth. And if we put our cursor to hover around, we should be able to see the name of the variable. Q1 means sex, Q2 age, marital status, and so on and so forth. So when it comes to data entering, QID, by the way, stands for questionnaire identification number. So if you enter in the first questionnaire, it will be questionnaire 1. You input 1 there. So sex, what is your sex? These are just hypothetical responses which I'm trying to use to show you how to enter data. So suppose someone says they are male. You're going to just, instead of writing the whole word male, you just enter the number 1 to mean male, and you go the next. So you see that just by putting 1, it automatically fills in to say male. The second question was, how old are you? Maybe this person is 40 years old. They'll put 40 like that. Third question was, what is your marital status? Suppose this person is married, so they'll input number 2, which represents marriage in like shown in our questionnaire here. Here are the responses, and here are the values assigned to each response. So if you're married, you put 2. So here in our data entry, instead of writing the whole word married, all you do is write the number 2 and you go the next one, and automatically it will fill in as married, and so forth and so on. Highest level of education, if I put 2, it's going to fill in according to what you put in. So basically you go through this all the way until the end. This is how you enter a questionnaire. And if you can see, everything with numeric has got a dot on it. Everything with string is plain, because it leaves you room for you to type your response like I'm doing right now accordingly. But here where it's numeric, if I try and type anything like that and press enter, it won't agree. Maybe I say name, it won't agree. Why? It's only going to agree the values assigned to this response, which is in this case of how long have you worked. Let's look at that question. Yes, so let's use this question for instance. Highest level of education is question 4. Look at question 4. So question 4, there are only 6 responses assigned to it. So it's only going to accept any number from 1 to 6. Even if I put 10 here, you see, nothing has come because there's no response assigned to 10. But if I put any number between 1 and 6, maybe I put 4, it will change according to the response that we had assigned for 2. So this is how you go on entering data. Let me just give you a sample of how it will look when you enter data with many questionnaires. So this is how you expect your data to look when you have entered questions, or when you've entered your data or the responses that you got from your respondents. So here on, you can choose which view you want to look at it from. If you can see it in terms of the values, or you can see it in terms of the numbers by clicking here. Then all you have are the numbers that you're entering, the 1s, the 2s, to represent a certain value or a certain response according to the answer that you gave. But if you click here on this icon here, it will show you everything you've entered. So in the first questionnaire, this was a male, he was 38 years old, he was married, he had his first degree, and so on and so forth. In the fourth questionnaire, it was a female that answered, she was 24 years old, she's single, and she's up to diploma, and so on and so forth, and you have all her responses accordingly. So basically, this is how you enter data, and if you want to continue, you just continue from 51. You can enter a huge sum of data, maybe up to 10,000 questionnaires. Like we said yesterday, one of the advantages of SPSS is that it allows you to handle huge sums of data. So this one only had 50 responses, that's why we only ended up to 50. But if you've got 1,000, 2,000 responses, you're going to enter data up to 2,000 responses. So basically, this is how you set your variables in variable view, and this is how you enter data in your data view. We end here for today. Hope everything was clear. Tomorrow we'll look at how to analyze data, and we're going to use this same data set as an example for data analysis, and we're going to see how we're going to analyze some aspects of this data easily just by the click of our button. Thank you very much for your attention. Have a good evening.